Marco.
Sean.
I have an ace and a queen. Jack, queen, king. I don't know. Take your pick. Does it matter if it's Jack, queen, king?
I don't know. Your
Could even
poker
be a
face.
10.
Your poker face is really bad.
Is it bad? And the way I talk about it's really bad too. I don't know. I have 21. Hit me. No, wait, don't hit me. I think that's what most casinos say. Don't hit me. Casinos like to keep their money. Don't hit me.
And be careful what you wish for when you talk about hit me and we talk about cybersecurity.
Exactly.
What are you going to be hit with? So
I think there's probably something that we can talk about that today. So this is part of our chats on the road, not to Vegas, but to San Francisco RSA conference. You might have gotten confused there. This chats on the road to not to Las Vegas, San Francisco for RSA conference, where Marco and I get to talk to cool people and look at some of the sessions that are going on. And this one caught my attention for a couple of reasons. First, the guests. Amazing. Good to have you on again, Tennisha, and good to meet you, Aleise. And also the topic, Blackjack and breaches is the topic. So now you can kind of guess what we're rambling on about, or at least what I'm rambling on about. So we're going to get into that. But first, I want to give Tennisha and Aleise a bit of space to share what they're up to. Of course, Tanisha's been on the show before. It's good to have you back. Why don't you say a few words, Tennisha, what you're up to at the moment?
Absolutely. So I am currently working on a doctorate in cybersecurity with a focus on artificial intelligence. And part of the reason why I actually started looking at this topic is, number one, I love to gamble. And then number two, I'm interested in some of the advances in the gaming industry, for example, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and adoption of the gaming and the casino industry, and some of the, I think, kind of roadblocks that are preventing, that from happening, especially like within the United States. So that's kind of like what my interest in and what I've been up to, I guess, for the past, 6 months to a year or so. But I'm super excited to be back, and thank you guys for having us.
Awesome. And Aleise?
Yes, I'm Aleise McGowan. Look, I survived my PhD, so I feel Tanisha's pain. Like by day, I'm an assistant professor at the University of Southern Mississippi, and by afternoon, evening, night, early mornings, I'm the CISO for BlackGirlsHack. And so Tanisha pitched the idea, and I think in my write-up, I said I was a baby gambler. But the more I looked into it, it was really intriguing, the whole digital ecosystem that's kind of intertwined into the casino industry. So that's why I'm here.
Well, it's definitely catchy. Sean said to me, hey, you need to be part of this because it's going to be a good topic. And I read the title and I'm like, okay, I definitely want to know. You got my attention. So apart from the passion for playing cards or gambling, I mean, what is so relevant right now that made you pick this topic? Tennisha, let's start with you.
Absolutely. So for me, I think it was in August of last year, maybe August, September of last year, there were two very high profile breaches. One of those was with the MGM, and the other one was with, I believe it was Caesars. And they were both ransomware attacks, and they both had very, very different outcomes based on what I assume is different leadership and different approaches to risk management. And when I saw those, I started investigating because I was like, this is super interesting how you can have, what's basically the same threats, but then completely different outcomes. So, we started looking into what the breaches were in the industry. And those were the first two that I had seen. But when we started investigating, there were nowhere near the first or the second, probably not the 10th number of breaches that have happened in this industry. But I think that what stood out to me, I actually had visited an MGM property during the period where this was going on, because I think it took several months for it to kind of resolve and for them to get back up and running. And it was very interesting the way that things were impacted. I think there was probably a bigger impact there than it was like at the beginning of COVID, which was crazy. But, you know, because so many things were interconnected, I think that it basically, to some places, brought them down to a halt, which I thought was super interesting, because I was like, you know, how are all of these things connected online, and should they be? So I thought that was super interesting, and Aleise is always like down for a good investigation, especially when it's you know, in the middle of the night when she's not sleeping. So
you're just like, we'll sleep.
Well, tell me a little bit about what technology is used, because I don't know how many. Has it been 10 years now that I was back in behind the scenes of a casino, looking at the security operations center and kind of the stuff they worry about. And it was traditional IT stuff that they were primarily managing, and at least sharing with us, a group of us getting the tour. But one of the things in the description you have is ICT, and you mentioned blockchain and of course, AI, we have to mention that. Of course, these organizations are using the latest technologies available to them to provide the best experience, right? And to provide the best returns to the business. So who can paint a picture of kind of what's involved there? I don't know, are blockchains embedded in the cards nowadays? And do the roulette balls have sensors in them? And I don't know, they probably have all this time, but I don't know, what are we seeing in terms of exposure of technology?
Look, I usually play roulette, and I go with the balls have something in them. But one of the biggest things that I can think about them using is like facial recognition and AI. So even using that to identify players that may have been banned from the properties and things like that. And Tennisha, you may have some more that you can speak to.
Yeah, I was one of the things that I found interesting. Like, I don't know if you guys watch, like, for example, poker. I watch a lot of online poker, and what's interesting is that they have, like, you know, for example, RFID chips in the playing cards, for example. And like all of the systems that they basically use, if you imagine like all of the different games, between the ones that play cards, the ones that play dice, you know, there are different ways that these things are connected. And I think that the thing that I found interesting is that when you look at the use of, you know, when we're talking about AI, for example, when you look at the use of AI for a casino, like, it makes sense to me that they would be like, you know, hey, Tennisha likes playing poker, so, you know, we're going to send her some deals for poker, or, you know, she likes staying in, you know, nice hotel rooms, so we're going to send her some deals for that, right? But, you know, what was interesting is the way that a lot of the games themselves shut down during the breach, right? And the ability to see like which games were up and running. You would think, all right, well, maybe it's just the slot machines, but it wasn't just the slot machines. There were also table games and other things that were in place as well, which to me was like, you know, hey, there's a lot more things that are interconnected here than you would think just from, you know, face value.
So that makes me think one thing. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Battle for Your Brain, which is all about the use of IoT devices and the study the frequency of your brain, which pretty much still we're going to be reading your mind. So when you start talking about the casino we already knew about all the camera to check out that things are okay, but the things that you can do with AI, kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm already reading in the future with this, but it's pretty scary. And again, how do you treat it in a way that you can just be safe or create silos or compartment where you say you were shocked that it would have affect everything or let's say a lot of things. So how is that? Does it need to be all interconnected like this?
I don't know if it necessarily needs to be. When you look at what, folks think that the future of gaming is going to look like, where you can basically do it, beyond borders, across, nations and states and whatever the case may be. It's super interesting. There are a lot of, I think, legislative and regulatory hurdles right now that will prevent that from happening within the United States. But at some point, there needs to be a way for us to be able to, and by us, I mean like the industry, being able to monitor, to know what's going on. One of the, I think, ways that at least MGM, if you've read their privacy policy, which I have, they say that they use it to detect things like cheating, for example. They also, use things like, they mentioned your biological material. I don't know what that means to this day, but that found that interesting. But then also things like license plate readers and, facial recognition. That's, I think that's standard par for the course type of things, right? But when you're talking about, the wave of the future, like let's say if you're wearing a VR headset, right? And you go into the casino and they're like, hey, Tennisha, the game you like is over this way. The food that you like is this way. Folks that you typically play with are in the casino. They're at this table and this, what I'm saying? This machine hasn't hit in, X amount of time, right? So if we're having all of these things connected from a security perspective, what's interesting is, hey, yes, we have as consumers a lot more information available to us. Like, hey, if this machine hasn't hit in a while, maybe it's time for it to hit, right? But at the same time, I think that also improves our outcomes, especially if you think about, in-person games like poker and any of the card games, whether you're playing human versus another human. So I think that something that's interesting to me is like looking at the security. What does that actually look like for the gaming industry, especially as we tend to move towards things full speed, such as artificial intelligence and blockchain and, all of the virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever the possibilities are moving forward. We need to do that in a way that takes a look at the security of the system in a way that, we can still have fun, but, we're protected as well.
Yeah, and Aleise, I like your perspective on this, because I'm seeing three things. So one, clearly the human-driven fraud. They're trying to get a handle on that. And they're using technology to do that. If they do that too well, that may impact legitimate players, right, and their experience, and might make it less fun at the casino. And then there's just the general business side of it. We have to make enough money to provide an experience, so we're using technology to do that. But now we're also exposing ourselves and adding more risk for technical or digital type of fraud. So it's this juggling act, if you will. And every company has it, not just casinos, but this juggling act. So I'm wondering, how do you perceive organizations like the casinos kind of tweaking those knobs and flipping those levers and sliding the slides to find that right mix of risk, reward, experience, revenue, all that good stuff, shareholder value?
Well, I guess just like with every other industry, it's all about, balance, balancing, figuring out what your risk appetite is and, providing, figuring out how to move forward. Because like, even with the protections that are in place, you've got like technologies like quantum computing and things like that, coming down the pipe that are going to revolutionize things like, data security and make current like things that we're doing as far as encryption methods obsolete. So it's just always going to be like, no matter what, having to try to improve, what it is that we're doing while, having a competing interest of making sure that the players are happy and able to do, what they need to do, because that's where you get your money from as, the casino. So it's just all about trying to figure out how to balance and keep everybody happy and safe.
And I think I would probably also say that it at the end of the day, I think data is king, right? When it comes down to it, they're collecting all of this information, not necessarily to make the environment more safe or more enjoyable. Like when it comes down to it, the information they're collecting gives them a more of a complete profile of the people who are actually using their facilities, the people who are actually gambling, which for them, of course, probably means higher, probability of you continuing to do that, especially if they can figure out, the human perspective of which is what makes each one of these people tick. What do they do in certain scenarios, things of that nature. And I think that the data, is probably going to be more valuable to them than the actual, gambling themselves, just because I think like many organizations, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, for example, some of the social media sites, doesn't necessarily matter that you have access to all of your friends and family, right? What matters is that they have all of this data that they can now use, to determine what is it that you're purchasing, what do you do, things of that nature, which I think is far more valuable to the industry than anything else.
Yeah, they're blowing up a casino to put in a new ball field, which more sports betting over slot machines, it seems.
Or maybe there's going to be both. By the time that you go
in every seat.
Right. They could just put it in like one of those behind the chair, like little screens where you can just basically gamble there while you're sitting there and watching the game.
Or while you're waiting. I mean, I hope you're not going to gamble while you're watching the game, but there are level of addiction.
Or concert.
But they have you guys probably know they have the slot machines in the airport at the in Las Vegas, right? So like they have a long set precedent of why don't you go ahead and play while you're waiting, So I don't think it's they're above that.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So before we dive into maybe give a little of the teaser for what your talk is really focusing on, so we can achieve our objective to have people come and actually fill the room for you guys and look and watch, listen to the conversation. One observation that I have is I cannot think a better place for adversary to experiment more than on the gambling table. All this new technology, like you say, the camera were there so that, back in the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, to be sure that you're not cheating just by looking at the physical aspect of things. But now again, if you have something that, smart glasses or smartphone or a way to get the excitement in the reading the face, literally the poker face we were joking about with Sean at the beginning. I mean, it's an entire environment of almost like a lab for attack and therefore for defense. So I don't know if you want to add a comment to this, but for me, that could be a movie right here, a very high-tech sci-fi movie, just about that.
And I think that they're shooting for that, very high-profile, movie aesthetic, and I think that when we tend to design systems, we tend to go with the outcome in mind and build security in as an afterthought, right? Mm-hmm. So, as a hacker, for me, like that seems like super interesting. I'm not trying to get banned forever or anything like that, but I would love to be involved in like either physical or pen test of the casinos, because just from as a player, I think it's super interesting to see the technologies that they have, how they're interconnected, how the traffic flows, right? Because for the longest time, unless you're at like a slot machine, if you're like at a table, for example, they don't want you to have a phone there with you. And part of that is, in my mind, I've always thought it was because they don't want you basically tracking the outcomes of the hands to try to, generate, probabilities or whatever. In my mind, that's what I figured the reason for the ban on phones. But, I've seen over the last couple of years that some places are becoming more lax in terms of, that restriction. So I would really love to see, how that works, because it would literally be like a huge playground for me. Like if they let me loose in a casino and we're like, go forth and hack and do your worst. And like, I get that, get out of jail free card. And like, that would literally be what, a playground would look like for me.
Yep.
Look, I've got all my lockpick tools ready. They can call me anytime. I'll volunteer.
Right. I don't even necessarily know that they would have to pay me, because that just sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
Just don't put me in jail.
Right.
Need all the signed documents.
Well, they don't mind your phone being in there now, because you connect to their cell tower, not the carriers.
True. And they can see all of your traffic, which is the other thing that's interesting. Because, I think most people, non-security professionals, think nothing of, hey, my phone doesn't work when I get in here. Like, let me connect to their Wi-Fi. And then when you connect to their Wi-Fi, they basically see all of the traffic for what it is that you are doing. They get access to that. And if you look at their again, their privacy policy, the terms and conditions, like the things that they're allowed, like they've covered pretty much all of the things. And I'm looking at here and I'm like, they have a breach. I would expect, like, hey, maybe my phone and, my credit card numbers are released, but like the types of information that they're tracking today, and not to pick on them, I just happen to be researching them for a project. But the type of information that they're tracking, points towards a future which is very integrated, which includes, things like artificial intelligence and virtual reality and, blockchain. And I think it's going to be super interesting once they start getting over, like I said, some of those regulatory and legislative hurdles, to be able to, make it so that you can play anywhere, at any time.
So they could see me searching for how to count cards on my toes. All right, well, let's do this. We could talk about this for a long time, I'm sure, but I want people to come see you at RSA conference Wednesday, May 8th, 2:25. Your session is Blackjack and Breaches: History of Ransomware on the Casino Industry. You gave us a snippet, Tennisha, of why this came to be, but who do you want to join you there? Who are you speaking to as part of this session? What do you hope they get out of this?
I'd say it's probably split. I'd say it's interesting for your, avid gambler, but I think as security professionals, it's also interesting as well, because I think that when it comes down to it, when you're just looking at, like I said, for us, the difference between like the two situations, which happened basically, I think, within mere weeks of each other, and the severity of the outcomes in terms of financial and the length of time that it took to recover from it, I think are both super interesting. There's some lessons learned there. And I think also when we look at the history of what, it looks like across all of the different gaming industry, the different casinos and the different breaches that they've had over the past. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think maybe we identified like between 10 and 15 different breaches that have happened. My hope is that it would help to improve security within the industry. And then, cybersecurity practitioners can look at some of the parallels that exist in terms of, your response to issues, having a reactive approach versus a proactive approach to security, which I think a lot of the casinos do. We've seen some trends which let certain things about the industry as a whole, and we're going to say hey, this is what we're seeing. This is some recommendations that we can provide that on how to make it better. And for people who are maybe not necessarily in the gaming industry, this is what you can take away, just as far as being able to look at the breaches that happen and assess what's the best way to move forward in terms of lessons learned.
Aleise, anything to add to that?
Nope, she covered it. That's the biggest thing that I was going to say was that, it's applicable to multiple industries or whatever, and the actionable items that, we'll give during the presentation can definitely be applied.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking when you were going over all the things like the parallel with airport security or other venue of entertainment, like big parks and all of that, where you need to show that everything is sparkly and safe, and in the backstage is where a lot of things are actually happen so that you can enjoy your gaming, your entertainment, and everything you do in those locations. So I think it's exciting. Definitely going to try to stop by when we are in our. Now I was going to say Las Vegas. I'm thinking Las Vegas right now, but actually San Francisco. So Moscone, and we're looking forward to see you guys there. And Sean,
well, we can get
don't bring your card, please. Just
I'll leave the cards back. We can do our pretend casino at the arcade museum. I'm sure we'll find something.
I'll play pinball.
You're risking a quarter. Nice one. Well, it's a pleasure to have you both on, Tennisha and Aleise. And thanks everybody for listening to and watching this episode, our Chats on the Road to RSA conference. We have loads more coming up, and of course, lots of fun stuff on location there, Marco and I. And so stay tuned, ITSPmagazine.com/RSAC. Everything is there. And we'll see you all very soon. It's coming up very quick. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.